Our guest today has covered both the Mets and the Yankees for the New York Times, and since 2003, he has been a reporter, insider, and writer for all ESPN entities, including ESPN Radio, ESPN News, SportsCenter, and his own show, the Baseball Tonight podcast. Buster, thank you so much for joining the show.
Sure. Great to talk with you, Tim.
So, Baseball Tonight with Buster Olney is your podcast on ESPN. For the majority of your early career, you were a beat reporter and writer. How much of an
Yeah.
adjustment was hosting your own show?
Well, huge. I mean, getting into television, getting into podcasting, radio, more radio stuff. It was a huge adjustment. I had no interest in any of that. I always looked down when I was a beat writer working at the Times or the Baltimore Sun at San Diego Union before that. I always looked down on TV people, and thought, yeah, that's pretty simple, right? And then what I realized that when I started doing it is that it was really the same challenge that you have when you write an 800, 900 word story. You're trying to tell the story within the time you have. And there are times when, for example, if I'm doing television, it's within a 45-second bite. It might be within a 25-second bite, depending on how quickly the show is moving. And all that, for sure, for me, took a lot of practice.
Knowing what's going on with every single team at all times, what is like the biggest challenge of doing that?
Well, I mean, certainly, you watch games on television, you read box scores, and then there's a story behind the stories. And you want to make sure that you have some level of knowledge, whether you're reading up on a team, you're texting a hitting coach, you're connecting with a general manager, you're speaking off the record with different people. And with 30 teams, it is a challenge for sure. I love talking with agents too. They give you a different perspective. But all of that, of course, takes a lot of time.
Absolutely. So I know you are a lifelong Dodgers fan. So I want to know, with all of these collective bargaining agreement negotiations going on that are kind of targeting teams like the Dodgers, such as, the banning of deferred contracts and the salary cap, what do you make of these proposals?
So, and just to be clear, like I was a lifelong Dodger fan in my life before covering baseball.
Right, right.
Like I started covering the Nashville Sounds in 1989. They were affiliate of the Cincinnati Reds, and it was kind of amazing how quickly it went away, right? Because then you just report based on the perspective of the team that you're writing about or you're covering, and that's very different. But I think you referenced the fact that the Dodgers are at the top of the food chain with how much money they've been spending, all the deferred contracts. And certainly the other owners are going for a system that would tamp down the Dodgers spending, a salary cap. I covered the 94-95 strike that the players had back then when owners tried to put a salary cap upon them, tried to change baseball's financial system. At that time, the players held together. And the owners are going for that now. And that's the big question. Can the players hold together again? When the owners talk about wanting to have competitive balance, it makes me laugh. It's not about competitive balance. It's about containing costs, and it's about cost certainty, and it's about not having your payroll explode because another team in your division spends a lot of money, and you feel like you have to keep up. That's what the owners are going for. I think they're probably are in a better position to go for it than they have been in a long time, because my sense of the union, and I don't know how this is going to play out, is that they, at the moment anyway, they're not nearly as closely banded as they were in that 94-95 strike.
Do you think baseball will be played in 2027?
Yeah, I do, but I think it's going to be ugly before then. Like, I think you're going to have a bloody fight where, I mean, clearly the owners are going to lock out the players on December 1st. They're going to go through negotiations. You might actually lose some games. But I think the owners are serious this time. I mean, their proposals are sweeping from the installation of an international draft to, the reduction of who's draft eligible, to the point that they wouldn't allow high school players to be involved on top of the salary cap. So they're going for it, right? They're absolutely, they're going for the whole thing right now. And the challenge is going to be for the players to keep together. Look, I think the most underreported story by dopes like me in the last round of CBA is, 4 years ago, was the fact that the rank and file among the players flat out rejected the advice of their executive committee. Like, the executive committee voted unanimously to turn down the owner's last proposal. And the rank and file basically said, no, we want to go back to work. That's the first time I think that's ever happened in my time covering labor negotiations. And I'm wondering about especially with all the strife at the head of the union, what the relationship now is between the rank and file players and the union leadership. When people say, the players are against the salary cap, we don't know that. We know the union leadership is against the salary cap. And as we saw in the last negotiation, there's a big difference.
Well, you mentioned that there might be, less games. I think you said they might cut games. How many games do you think they'd play? Like, how many games could get cut?
Yeah, it depends on how bloody the fight is, right? And if, in fact, and who blinks first. I mean, you've seen those situations, Tim, where, you have at the end of the national anthem, a player on each side will just stay in front of the dugout, and it's a standoff. It's a stare down. That's what this is. It's hard. I've seen folks in our industry who write about the pluses and minuses, this proposal, that proposal. Look, there is no middle ground to having a salary cap or not having a salary cap. And if the union leadership is intent on saying, no, absolutely not, we're not going to change the financial system, then it's just going to come down to who blinks first.
I want to kind of switch lanes now and let's get into a little bit of a free agency talk. There are a lot of teams hanging around that 500 mark. Which team, if any, do you think could be a superstar trade away from kind of going to the next level?
Well, that's not fully defined yet, I think. And it's why now, as we get closer to the trade deadline, a lot of the messaging coming out from teams is we're going to wait until the All-Star break, which as you and I talk, we're only like 10 days away from that. Right. So the decisions are going to be made by teams like the Tigers, who, as of this morning, have like a 17% chance to make the playoffs. They're 7 games out of the race for the third wild card. But as you know, the American League absolutely stinks this year. And there's a lot of data, that backs up that statement. And that's going to keep some teams in play. I think right now, and the big question coming into this year was, which team is best positioned to challenge the preeminence of the Dodgers? I think that team right now, as you and I speak, are the Philadelphia Phillies. Since they got Zach Wheeler back, the managerial change, getting JT Realmuto, their veteran catcher, back in their lineup, all of that, since that happened, they have been playing tremendous baseball, like 110 win pace. And we saw, last fall, the Phillies were a big threat to knocking out the Dodgers in the division series. So if Phillies go out and add a right-handed hitter, and I think they'll do that, and I'm looking at someone like Taylor Ward of the Baltimore Orioles, if he winds up being sold, or Tarik Skubal, if in fact the Tigers would wind up selling, if they were to swoop in and make a big aggressive deal, then yeah, the Phillies could stand to gain a lot of ground. A lot of people have wondered about the Dodgers and some of the bigger names, but keep in mind the Dodgers are, as you and I speak, are on a 104 win pace, and they haven't gotten anything out of Blake Snell. And Edwin Diaz, their closer, is on the injured list. He's coming back soon. Tyler Glasnow is on the injured list. So even though they may not necessarily go out and make big, bold trades, they're still going to be getting a lot of help between now and the end of the regular season.
I want to stick to Skubal there because he's obviously the biggest piece in this deadline. Do you think he ends up getting moved? What team could possibly be the best suitor for him?
Yeah, I do think he gets moved because their general manager is considered to be, Scott Harris is considered to be objective in his analysis. We've seen times when, a team's owner, a team's general manager will play out the Hail Mary. Hey, we have a 2% chance. Let's go for it. Right? That is not Scott Harris. In the read of a lot of his peers, Skubal's a free agent in the fall. He's not going to re-sign with the Tigers. He's too expensive. And we don't even know, what financial system is going to be in place. So we don't necessarily know at the moment, what kind of compensation they would get if they did let him go and he signed someplace else. So I think they're going to trade him unless they make a mad run here over the next 2 weeks. And if they do, look at the Atlanta Braves, look at the Tampa Bay Rays, watch the Philadelphia Phillies. The Dodgers will stay involved because they typically will stay involved in stuff like that. A lot of people have connected the Yankees with him, but I think the Yankees have other more important needs, such as a right-handed hitting catcher.
You mentioned the hitter there. Is there any big moves other than that you think the Yankees are going to make? Do you expect them to do anything?
I do. And just having known Brian Cashman for a lot of years now and his tenure as general manager of the Yankees, I started covering him, I think, in the same week that he took over that job. I think Brian, if he feels like he has a really good team that's maybe one or two pieces away, he's apt to be more aggressive. And despite their recent struggles, once they get Judge back, which would be sometime in late August or early September, perhaps, once they get Giancarlo Stanton back, that's a pretty good team, right? But they do need some balance, right-handed balance in their lineup. Ryan Jeffers is such an interesting guy for them. If the Minnesota Twins decide to become a seller, he's a respected receiver behind the plate. He's got some power. He's a free agent in the fall. So I suspect that if the Twins fall out of the race, they'd be more apt to trade him. And they will upgrade on bullpen. Now, that's going to start with Carlos Agrange, hard-throwing right-hander that they have transitioned from starter to bullpen down in the minor leagues to prepare him for that role. I think they'll also go out and add a relief pitcher as well.
Do you think during this stretch here, there's been a lot of fire Boone, propaganda all over the place? Do you think Boone is a problem for this Yankees team?
No, I don't. And I'm going to just say flat out, I worked with Aaron for years at ESPN, and I'm biased, and I've seen, the way he runs the team and the way players respond to him. Let's face it, a lot of this is generated on social media, the unhappiness. For example, when they lost the last game in Boston and Booney said, and I've known him forever. And so when he came out and had that comment about, hey, let's go, baby, this is what we do, we grind out, the way it was perceived on social media was, that's weird. And knowing Aaron, who is a glass half full personality, he goes into his office. He's thinking, am I going to sit here and mope and gripe and complain when the reporters come in? No, I'm going to try to spin it forward, which if you're a manager, that's what you need to do. And so he, in that moment, is just like, you know what? This is part of baseball. Every team through the course of a season will have ups and downs and slumps and struggles and that sort of thing. And I think that, Booney, it is part of the reason why he loves this sport is that, failure is inherent in baseball for, all the outs that hitters make and the struggles that pitchers go through. And I think that's what Booney's message was to his players.
Let's talk about the Mets. If they're a complete fire sale here, who else is leaving the New York Mets?
It's not a long list, okay? Certainly you start with Freddie Peralta. Clay Holmes, if he comes back before the trade deadline, demonstrate that he's healthy. But here's what works against the Mets when it comes down to the trade deadline. What they have available are the best parts are starting pitchers. I think there are actually going to be a lot of starting pitchers available. Some positions like right-handed hitters, there's a scarcity. But with starting pitchers, and I'm, just going to speculate through a bunch of names, Tarik Skubal, Robbie Ray, Tyler Mahle, they're just on and on. I could name 10, 12 guys. Then you have Freddie Peralta, who has not pitched that well, as you know, and Holmes, who is coming back from the broken leg. I think it's going to be tough for the Mets to get a lot of great value. But here's the thing. There are going to be a number of teams looking for a starting pitcher, whether it's the Phillies at the back end, whether it's the Atlanta Braves. We'll see where the San Diego Padres are, how much they are in contention. So I think the Mets will get something for Peralta, but maybe not nearly as much as what they expected when they traded for him in the spring.
The state of this team is kind of all over the place. What are your thoughts on just the construction of the roster?
So I've got a lot of respect for David Stearns, who's their head of baseball operations, and I know people around baseball too, but it's as if David, in making his moves, was flipping a coin, okay? And every time he called heads, it came up tails. It really is amazing when you're talking about making the decision for Pete Alonso to move, to essentially let him go, to trade Brandon Nimmo, Jeff McNeil, to bring in Marcus Semien, to sign Bo Bichette to the contract that he has, Freddie Peralta, Luis Roberts, Jorge Polanco. Every single one has come up tails. It's incredible. And as we sit here today, the best thing that's going to come out of the Mets 2026 season is potentially the continued development of Nolan McClain, who looks to be an ace going forward, and the promotion of those two young outfielders, Ewing and Benj. Besides that, it's hard to identify exactly where the bedrock is. Certainly Juan Soto, but now Francisco Lindor is starting to get to a stage in his career where you're not exactly sure what you're going to get year to year. I'm sure you saw Steve Cohen was on the New York Post podcast the other day, and he talked about how he has a lot of concerns about the team going forward because their farm system quality, now that they've graduated guys like McLean, Sproat, who went to the Milwaukee Brewers, the two outfielders, it's not nearly as deep, and there's not a lot of help there. So I don't know what the bedrock is. I don't know what the foundation of this team is going forward. And it's why Steve Cohen mentioned that he needs his front office to be imaginative because they're going to have to make chicken salad out of something else.
Are Soto and Lindor actually fighting, or is that just a media thing?
No, I don't think they got along great. I mean, I heard a lot of stories about that, but here's that part of that I do think is overstated. Were they best friends last year? No. Do I think that they were, coming to blows every day, battling it out in the clubhouse? I don't. Francisco Lindor is like a nice guy. Juan Soto is a really bright guy. And in San Diego, some of the other players had problems with him, but it's not. And I've covered clubhouse cancers. Neither one of those guys is that. And what, Steve's remarks the other day that Lindor and Soto don't have a problem anymore. I strongly suspect that what happened is that at some point, because there was all that chatter in 2025 about them not being best of friends, that at some point, maybe Cohen got them together, sat down for dinner and say, hey, guys, let's work this out. Let's be more functional as we go forward. Maybe it was Carlos Mendoza who fostered that. Maybe it was David Stearns. But I think it's functional. It's not like you walk into that clubhouse and you feel like, man, these two guys just hate each other and they're screaming at each other.
Buster Olney on the show. One more question before I let you go. I saw an article at the beginning of the season ranking your top 5 free agent signings of all time. My question is, where is Aaron Judge, arguably the best right-handed hitter of all time, and the contract looks so good compared to the contracts that are in the league right now?
So I don't remember that article per se. So I can't even remember which one. But the reason why I'm sure I didn't have Judge in there is because he was returning to the Yankees, right? Now, I'm sure you've heard the story. The San Diego Padres got involved. They were offering Judge more money in theory. And Judge, it really helped to clarify his mindset, which is, I really want to play for the Yankees. And that leads him to contacting Hal Steinbrenner. And Hal Steinbrenner, hearing that, says, okay, we'll give you one more year, and gets the $360 million. Look, if you remember that spring, the Yankees offered $213.5 million. And Aaron Judge bet on himself, went into free agency. If you want to call that, the best free agent signing, given what we've seen with contracts with Soto, with Ohtani, with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I can't disagree with you.